Oh god, this is so heavy. Oh. In this episode, we're going to be installing coilovers. Welcome to another episode of Mr. Room TV, proudly supported by Pro Speed Racing. In this episode, we're going to be talking about suspension. Now, the main reason for the existence of suspension is comfort. Without suspension, everything that your car goes over on the road, all of the energy would just get transferred straight to your bum, and that would be very uncomfortable. The suspension also acts to maximize the contact patch between the tires and the ground. Manufacturers tend to put quite soft suspension in regular cars just so that it's very easy for regular people to live with. But people like you and me, we're not regular people, we're car enthusiasts, and we want a little bit of a firm ride so we can feel like we're connected to the road when we're driving, especially through the mountains and on the track. And this car, my Rexy, is not a regular everyday vehicle. Yeah, it's very accessible, but it's a sports car. Now, the back of this car, the suspension is terrible. It's so soft and it bounces around so much even after the front of the car has settled down. It's like a jumping castle in the back. So today, we're going to fix that up by installing a set of Silver's Neomax Black Limited Edition coilovers. It's been raining a lot in Sydney. I've been waiting forever to get this on. It's finally sunny, so I want to try and get this on today. Let's go! Alright, so I'm also going to be lowering the height of the car. Not by much, maybe by 25-30 mils. Now, the actual ride height of the car I quite enjoy because it's quite practical. Now, the height of the rear I think is really cool, but the front I reckon is like a bit of a monster truck. Alright, but I do like the practicality of it, so I don't want to ruin it by lowering it too much. Springs are essential for any car because they absorb some of the bumpiness on the surface of the road. The springs go through two motions: compression, which is when the tires go over a rock, and rebound, which is when the springs return the wheels to its neutral position. The purpose of the strut is to absorb some of the vibrations and energy of the spring by dampening the motions. Otherwise, the spring will keep bouncing up and down and you'll feel like you're driving a jumping castle. Forgot to mention, I did get these sick wheels off the Facebook Marketplace. They are the NKSC46 in bronze. They look so cool. I'll put the wheel specs up. And they've got some semi-slicks. I bought this off a very wealthy man for a very good price. These are Destino semi-slicks. They're really good. They are the direct competitors to the AD08R or something. They're almost the perfect offset. I reckon they look just right. Now, these springs do come with a set preload from the factory. There's a preload of 8K. That means to compress these springs by 1mm, you need 8 kilos of force. Now, these things are really cool because they're fully height adjustable by spinning that collar down there, and there's also a little nub at the top that allows you to change the dampening. There's also camber at the front, camber adjustment, but I'll leave that to the wheel alignment shop after. Here I'm checking the preload by measuring the length of the springs to see if they're even. I assumed that it came from the factory with a set preload because they were quite tight, and some of the other Silver suspension do come with a set preload. However, I found out much later that there was a preload of 0 from the factory, which did cause me a few issues, and I'll talk about that later. So with the front suspension, first thing you want to do is undo these 3 bolts, but don't undo them all the way, leave them on loose so that they can stay there, and then we'll get underneath here to undo the ABS line. Take that off, 1 bolt, 2 bolts, and then also this brake line here, and that should all come off. A coilover is exactly as it sounds. It's a coil spring over a strut. Compared to the stock suspension, coilovers will allow you to adjust the ride height and in some cases, the level of dampening. You can also customize the spring rate to suit your driving style. Spring rate is basically the amount of force it takes to compress the spring a certain distance. The higher the spring rate, the stiffer the springs, and therefore the stiffer the ride.
Pretty heavy.
So here's a comparison of the old springs versus the new springs. You can see in the coilovers they have more coils and they have much less space for the springs to compress compared to those ones. So they're going to be harder to compress and they won't rebound as much as that as well. After setting the preload, you should measure the length of the stock strut and match it with the new coilovers. The height adjustment can be done easily when it's on the car, and I'll show you that later in the episode. When installing the coilovers, make sure that the camber slots are facing towards the wheels. Springs store energy, so when you hit something on the road, the spring compresses and stores that energy from the force of the motion pushing in, and the spring will want to release the energy pushing it back out. The dampers act by stopping springs from bouncing after the energy is released. The harder the dampening, the less the spring will bounce and in turn give a stiffer ride. The stiffer dampeners also help keep the car balanced and level under heavy acceleration or fast turning. This reduces the amount of body roll and weight transfer. Although coilovers can't reduce all the body roll, it does help. The Silver's Neomax Black Edition is one of the brand's entry-level coilovers. It's similar to the Silver's Neomax S, however is a bit stiffer and are the better choice if you take your car to the track. If you don't plan on any track days, then the Silver's Neomax S will do just fine. ProSpeed Racing are the main distributor for Silver suspension in Australia and have stock ready to ship. Of course, there are much better and more expensive coilovers on the market, but I decided to go with the Silver suspension because it was much cheaper and more accessible to enthusiasts compared to other brands. It's not cheap by any means, but definitely pushes out great performance for the price. Alright, so for the first thing you got to do in the rear, take out all of the rear cargo, all that stuff. Undo the pop clips around the corner, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Lift this up and you have access to 2 bolts on both sides. Undo those, don't undo them completely, just leave them loose. Then we'll move to underneath the car. So after you've undone the bolts for the stock suspension at the top, you gotta undo this one here. You can just pull it out from underneath. You also need to undo this bolt here to release the control arm. The rear coilovers go in the same way. Thread it through the bottom and screw the nut on up top. It might help to have a mate here. Right, so after you've installed the rear coilover, you just need to put it in the control arm there, bolt it up. Thanks to ProSpeed Racing for supporting the channel. My hands are so yuck. These suspension parts, Silver's Neomax Black Edition, I got from ProSpeed Racing. They're the main distributor for Silver's suspension, and they looked after me really well. There's a flat rate shipping fee of $15. If you're in Sydney Metro, you get your goodies delivered the very next day. If you use my code that's popping up on the screen right now, you can enjoy a discount across the whole ProSpeed Racing store. Some exclusions and conditions do apply, and I'll leave those just below the like button. Before we get onto the height adjustment, if you like what you're seeing and the content that I've been uploading, can you please do me a favor and hit the like, subscribe and bell icon? I really appreciate your support and it really helps me do what I'm doing. Now let's get on to the height adjustment. Alright, so I want to show you how to lower your ride height with coilover suspension. I measured the gaps between the locking collars and moved the bottom one up to lower the ride height. You can also measure from the top of the strut to the very bottom and lower it that way. If it's a bit hard, use a mallet just to unlock that. Spin this until you get the desired gap here. So I want 40 mils, that's still a bit high. That is a bit too short, and that is just about 4 mils. So after you've got that, you keep that there and you spin the rest of the coilover until this collar meets the bottom there. So when that meets, again, get your ruler, measure. That is about 4 mils. Happy days. Make sure that's tight. Get your key and tighten that up, and that is how you lower your coilovers. Make sure the opposite side is the same gap. So the procedure with adjusting the height in the rear coilovers is exactly the same. If you want it to be taller, just loosen that and you spin it the other way and then run that down, clamp it up. Let's go get a wheel alignment. So I'm on my way to work. It's been a few days since I finished putting in the coilovers. Since then, I've done a test drive. I've tinkered a little bit with the ride height, and I've also gone and gotten a wheel alignment. I just went to a local wheel shop, a really big franchise wheel shop, to get a wheel alignment, and was not happy. Steering wheel was bloody crooked after going to that place. Yeah, the car drove fine, but when I was driving straight, the steering wheel was a little bit crooked. I mean, I went back to them, they were really cool about it. You know, they admitted their mistakes and they fixed it up really quickly. So I'm not going to put them on blast, but I'm probably not going to go back. Alright, so in terms of the coilovers, the dampening levels from 1 to 12, I'm on about an 8, and it's still pretty comfortable driving every day. It's a lot better than the stock suspension, that's for sure. It doesn't bounce around nearly as much. It feels like you're in control around the corners, even at slow speeds. Right, the car doesn't bounce around, it's not like a jumping castle. It's bumpy, yeah, because it's more stiff, but it's not bouncy. Definitely appreciate that a lot more compared to the stock suspension. So I'm just doing a turn here, and no body roll. Well, very little body roll. Before I would feel myself being pushed over to the chair, but it felt really good. And even driving in general, around town, on the freeway, the car feels really good. Alright, I can't wait to get this on the track to see what it can do. And really, installing coilovers, super easy. That being said though, I think I did something wrong. Because I am developing some very small clunks at the front and at the back. And I'm pretty sure that's at no fault of the coilovers, probably my own user error. And I'm probably going to take it to a wheel shop to try and figure that out, because I haven't been able to figure that out myself. I think I finally found my clunking problem. It took me ages to figure it out, but I took the coilovers apart and I found that the stock preload, or the preload out of the box, actually isn't that tight. What I want to do is tighten this until it stops moving. On the other side, I had a preload of 5 mils, and I was still getting that clunking noise on the other side. So I made the preload a little bit more aggressive at 7.5, and still I was still getting that clunk. It wasn't until I set the preload to about 10 mils that it stopped moving side to side or front to back. It's going to be a little bit stiff, but let's see how it goes, and I'll adjust the dampening as I go for a test drive. So to adjust your preload, you've got to undo all of that until the spring is super loose and there's heaps of play. Then you twist it until it's hand tight, and then you move this collar up. Now after it's hand tight and this collar is up, you use your spanner key to move this collar up about 5 mils to your desired preload. This is about 5 mils thick, so you move that up until there's a gap enough to fit that. For me, I'm going to do that twice so I can get a preload of 10 mils. Alright, so I just went to buy this new lens that I'm filming with now. Let me know in the comments, how's the quality of this lens and this new camera? The new preload set, and honestly, I'm defeated. The clunking is still there. It doesn't sound like the clunking I had before I set the preload. That's definitely gone, but there is some sort of other clunking. I have no idea. Honestly, I'm so defeated. I've taken it apart so many times. I've gotten under the car so many times. I still haven't been able to find the issue, so gotta take it to the professionals. So defeated, I don't know. I've done what I can. It could be the sway bars that I've put in, which will be in the next video. Or I could have just completely cactused my car, I don't know. The car does feel amazing though. It feels great. It's so planted, so well done. And it's only happening over the bumps at low speeds. I don't get it when I'm driving on the freeway or at high speeds. That's really odd. And it tends to happen on my first ride, maybe first 15-20 minutes when I start the car. Now that's it guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember, hit the like, subscribe and bell icon. Please consider sharing this video to your mates. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.